1946, in Burlington, Vermont. His mother, whose maiden name was Eleanor Louise Cowell, was a prim, modest department store clerk who had come to Vermont from her home in Philadelphia to give birth to her child, a child born out of wedlock.
Ted was born illegitimate. He was born in a home for unwed mothers. His mother, I think, was about 23 then.
Soon after his birth, Eleanor took Ted back to Philadelphia. It was the beginning of a tragic charade. As he grew, Ted was told that his grandparents were his mother and father, and that Eleanor was his older sister. From an early age, Ted sensed he was living a lie. And there were other problems at home. Eleanor's mother had a history of clinical depression, suffered panic attacks, and was eventually treated with electroshock therapy. Her father, Samuel Cowell, was known to be an extremely violent and frightening individual.
Sam Cowell was evidently a man with maniacal temper, who read pornography, who tossed his daughters down the stairs if they slept too late.
As he grew into a young man, the confusion over his relationship with his mother would weigh on Ted. Even at the age of 3, there were signs that he was not a well-adjusted child.
His teenage aunt was taking a nap, and she woke up to see that he had taken all the knives out of the kitchen drawer and arranged them around her body with the blades pointing toward her.
His mother, concerned with this behavior and trying to escape the control of her father, moved with Ted to live near her Uncle Jack Cowell and his family in Tacoma, Washington. In later years, Ted said that it was devastating for him to leave Sam, the man he thought of as his father. In Tacoma, Eleanor went by her middle name Louise and worked as a secretary at the Council of Churches. One evening, she met a hospital cook named John Culpepper Bundy. Louise married him a year later, and her son finally had the name he would carry through life, Theodore Robert Bundy. But Ted was never close to John.
He had a lot of conflict with his stepfather, looked down upon his stepfather because his stepfather didn't have a high enough station in life.
Despite his new name, Ted still considered himself a Cowell and was drawn to his great-uncle Jack, a cultured music professor at the University of Puget Sound in Washington. Ted wanted to be just like him.
It was very important for him to be someone special, to be recognized in some way.
Over the next 10 years, John and Louise added 2 brothers and 2 sisters to the Bundy family. But Ted had little to do with them or their father.
He had a Boy Scout troop, but Ted would never go camping. He just seemed to remove himself from any connection to his stepfather.
And if there was no connection at home, there was even less at school. His junior and high school friends described Ted as very shy. He suffered from stuttering, and he did not date at all.
He really didn't date unless it was a Sadie Hawkins dance where the girls asked him.
But there was a secret side to Ted Bundy that was already emerging. He considered himself above the law. By the time he was 15, he had become an expert shoplifter and was a suspect in 2 burglaries.
Grandiose narcissism, the ability to outwit the police, the ability to flaunt authority, the ability to shoplift. All of these things helped confer on him this sort of narcissistic sense of specialness and entitlement.
His relationship with women also changed for the worse. He became a peeping Tom, sneaking through the night to peer into the windows of young girls. More significantly, there have always been suspicions that at the age of 15, Ted Bundy became a killer.
Ted carried the morning newspaper when he was 15. Along his route, there was a young girl named Anne Marie Burr. Anne Marie was 8.
Ted knew Anne Marie. She took piano lessons from his great-uncle Jack. On August 31st, 1961, Anne Marie's parents found her missing from her bedroom.
The window was open a little bit, and it was in the days when you had a TV cable on the roof and you had to get it under the window, so they couldn't lock it. The front door was ajar. She was gone.
A search that at one time involved 800 soldiers, lawmen, and volunteers found nothing. At the time, no one suspected that Ted may have been responsible for Anne Marie's death.
In my mind, she was Ted's first victim.
And there would be many more. In the mid-1960s, Ted Bundy was a student at Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma, Washington. Even though he was smart, good-looking, and friendly, he was awkward with his fellow students, especially the girls.
There seemed to be a real defect in this whole notion of how do you build a close, intimate relationship, and some confusion about that. The arena in which he seemed to feel secure was the school and the classroom where he could use his verbal skills, and that's where he tried to manage teachers' impressions.
He graduated from high school in 1965 with a B average. The next year, he entered the University of Puget Sound. But on the huge campus, he felt anonymous and lost.
Inside, Ted was very empty and very inadequate. But he could put on the facade of a very sophisticated, educated young man.
In 1967, as part of the facade, Ted transferred to the University of Washington's Asian Studies program, where he studied Chinese. He also began fabricating a new personality. If the old Ted was shy and withdrawn, the new Ted would be witty, cool, and self-assured. His deception was about to pay off. At the university, Ted met Stephanie Brooks. He was particularly attracted to her beautiful shoulder-length hair, which she wore parted in the middle. She was wealthy, sophisticated, and worldly. Everything Ted wished he was.
He said, she's perfect, she's beautiful, she's wealthy. And I think to the degree he was capable, he was in love with her.
They stayed together for a year. For the first time, Ted experienced an intimate sexual relationship with a woman. He was in love with her. But to Stephanie, they were merely college sweethearts. She saw no future in the relationship. She thought Ted was immature. Ted had become obsessed with her, but Stephanie told Ted their romance was over.
She told him that he wasn't going anywhere, that he had no ambition, he wasn't organized, he couldn't make plans.
Ted was devastated. With his world unraveling, he dropped out of school and decided to visit his relatives back in Philadelphia. His visit had a purpose. He had to answer the question that had always bothered him. Who was he? After checking records in Philadelphia, he traveled to Burlington, Vermont. There in City Hall, he learned something he had always suspected.
He discovered that his mother was actually the woman who'd been passing as his sister his whole life. And that has got to rock the world of anybody to find that their roots are not what they thought.
There was a great deal of turmoil around his own self-identity and who he was. By all accounts, when he found out that he was an illegitimate child, it was devastating.
This man was badly betrayed by a woman, his mother, and learned of that betrayal at the very period when he's still reeling from the rejection by his girlfriend, his first love.
Many who have studied Ted Bundy feel it was now that he decided to take revenge on the women he felt had destroyed his life. With an icy resolve, he returned to the University of Washington, took a room nearby, and began studying psychology. He excelled in all his classes and seemed rejuvenated with a new purpose. and whatever demons raged inside of him, Ted Bundy kept them